Hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg. It is Friday, which means I am filming my Friday Reads video, which will be posted on a Saturday, as I usually do it. I had been hoping that I would be able to get another video posted this week. I did not manage to. The only thing I got posted was my book haul for the month of June. I know I finished it a little bit early, but I wanted to make sure I got it posted because there are a lot of fun videos and video ideas coming since we are reaching the halfway point of the year. So I wanted to make sure I got the book haul in. Here's a sneak peek. The one I had been hoping to get in was a most anticipated books for the second half of 2021, because the list that I did in January, which I will link down below in the description box, really covers the first half of the year. There were only 3 books that went into July or beyond. So I kind of want to do an updated version of that. That's coming hopefully next week. Work was really busy, so I didn't have a whole lot of time to look into it, but also there's just a mess of publisher catalogs and things like that to go through, and I'm trying to be really thorough and diligent because I like to make things complicated. So that is coming up next week. I need to start getting ready to wrap up June and Pride Month reading because I can't believe it, but we're almost done with June. That's wild, right? And then once June is over, we have finished the first 6 months of the year, which means I need to do my first half of the year wrap up and the best books of 2021 so far, which I am working on and will probably be filming next week as well. So those are 3 things in addition to a Friday Reads video that I'm trying to get set up for next week. So hopefully the fact that I only managed to post 2 videos this week will be made up for then. That's your kind of look ahead for what's going on here. One thing I want to mention is that just this morning I saw news that Hamnet by Maggie is going to be adapted into a movie. And I don't know how to feel about that because on the one hand, I love Hamnet. It was one of my favorite reads of last year. On the other hand, I feel like that's going to be a difficult book to adapt, especially to adapt and keep the spirit of how Maggie O'Farrell did it. Because in a movie, Shakespeare is a pretty fundamental character in the book, even though he is not named. You know who he is. And I worry that you're going to lose that distinction in a movie. It can be done. I'm just a little bit skeptical, and I think it could easily be done wrong. But I'd love to hear what you think, and if you're excited about Hamnet being adapted into a movie, please let me know what you think in the comment section down below. I'll put a link to the announcement that I saw down below in the description box as well. Another thing I wanted to talk about is that in researching the most anticipated books for me in the latter part of the year, I noticed that Phoebe Robinson, who is one half of one of my all-time favorite podcasts, Two Dope Queens, they don't do it anymore, but I still love it and I still listen to it a fair amount, has a book coming out. And I saw that she started a publishing imprint called Tiny Reparations Books. It's a division of Random House, I believe, and I'll put a link to that down below. And kind of like Two Dope Queens sought to have a focus on diversity within the comedy world by featuring people and comedians from backgrounds that were not traditionally featured in your run-of-the-mill comedy shows in theirs. And this is basically the same principle, but in publishing. And I love that and I want to support it. So I am very eager to see how it grows and adapts and the type of things that it releases. So you can check out more about it in the link in the description box down below. Now, I'm gonna move into the actual Friday Reads portion of this video pretty early, but I need to do my 5K Q&A question, which is actually from my 3K Q&A, because I got a lot of reading done this week, guys. I finished 4 books and I have 2 more on the way. That is unprecedented for me lately. Back in the old days when I was in my 20s and working at Borders and had less going on in my life, that was pretty standard, but that hasn't happened in a long time. I finished 4 books in 1 week. Now, granted, I had already started one of them. I was pretty far into it when we started the week, but whatever. We'll get into that. Let's do the question first. This comes from David Stinson, and this is 2 parts, I believe. First one, do you ever do buddy reads with your husband? If so, what have you read together? If not, why not? Traditionally, we did not do buddy reads because he has not been much of a reader. He has read books. He introduced me to Call Me By Your Name and the Rosolian Isles books, which I loved, but he hasn't been too much of a reader. But recently, he's been on the road for work a lot, and he has been doing a lot more reading. So we have done 2 buddy reads. The most recent one being Last Call by Elon Green. We both read that at the same time. And the other one was earlier this month, This Town Sleeps by Dennis E. Staples. Unfortunately, because of his travel schedule, he usually has long drives where he listens to the audiobook, so he gets way ahead of me and then I have to catch up over the next few days. So it's not like your typical buddy read where you read to a certain point, check in, read to a certain point, and check in. Basically, he pretty much finishes the book and then I catch up to him. And we talk about it along the way. And it's been a nice experience. So we'll probably be doing more of that in the future. The second part of David's question is, you've referred often to your husband and I would like to meet him. Is there any chance that he might make a guest appearance in one of your future videos? Guinness has already appeared. Why not the husband? This was actually something that a lot of people in the 3K Q&A asked about, and we were going to work on it. But one thing, he's a little bit shy, and two, his schedule is not really aligned with my filming schedule, because usually at the times I am able to film a video, he's not home. He's not home right now. So it kind of is what it is. We're gonna figure something out at some point and maybe try to make it a little bit special or fun or interesting and go from there. But he will make an appearance at some point, I promise. I don't know if the schedule would work out, but because two of our buddy reads were this month, actually he just finished something that I'm listening to on audio right now. Maybe we'll try to do something next week so we can do a Pride Month reading wrap up, but no promises. Don't hold me to anything. All right, thank you David Stinson for the question. I have a couple more of those to do over the next few weeks, but let's get into the actual Friday Reads portion of the video. The first book that I finished of the four is Edinburgh by Alexander Chee, which is probably not too much of a surprise because I've talked about this book for the last 2 weeks and I had about 100 pages left when I did my last Friday Reads video. When we left off, I was having a little bit of difficulty with the subject matter of this book. It's a really heavy book for a lot of reasons. If you haven't seen my previous videos about it, where I've talked about it, it follows a character named Fee who is sexually abused by a choir director as a child. He's about 12 years old when the abuse happens, and he feels like he should intervene and say something because he knows it's going to happen to other boys, and it does happen to other boys. He witnesses it happening to other boys, but he doesn't. And ultimately, the man is arrested, and his best friend, Peter, commits suicide because of the abuse, and he blames himself for it, and the book kind of ricochets from there. I tore through the last 100 pages last weekend. I think I did a lot of it on Saturday, and then Sunday morning I finished it and threw it across the room. Startled the hell out of my husband and the dogs. We were all sitting there, and I think that sums up how the last 100 pages went for me. I really aggressively disliked a lot of the direction that this book took in those last 100 pages. The really unfortunate thing is that I can't really talk about the things that I disliked so much without heading into heavy spoiler territory. So I'm not really going to do it. I may do another video where I talk a little more in depth about the book, but I don't want to do spoilers here. The only thing I'll say is there's something that is described in the plot description on the back of the book, which is, as he grows up, he builds a new life teaching near his hometown. There he meets a young student who is the picture of Peter, his friend who committed suicide, and is forced to confront the past he believed was gone. The identity of this student is something of a twist, which is a little spoilery because I didn't know that going in, but I'm not going to say who or what it is. And I didn't like it. I can't talk about it. I really didn't like it. Alexander Chee is a great writer. I would be willing to read his other books at some point. I've heard a lot of really great things throughout this experience about how to write an autobiographical novel. So I would be willing to do that at some point, but it's going to need to be a while because I really disliked the ending of this book. So maybe I'll do another video where I talk about this a little bit more in depth. I'm gonna have to leave it there for now because I don't want to spoil things. I feel like I've already spoiled a little bit. Not much, because like I said, that is on the back of the book. But we'll leave it there for now. I did finish it. It's gonna be a while before I do another book of his. and this joins the ranks of the very few books that I have thrown across the room in anger. I believe the only other ones are Angels and Demons by Dan Brown, Adam by Ariel Schrag, and there is another one, The Spy Who Loved Me by Ian Fleming. There may be another that I'm forgetting, but those are the three I can remember right now, and the other one is Edinburgh by Alexander Chee. Now, once I finished that, I needed a palate cleanser, something fun and easy, kind of a win. So I picked up Bloom by Kevin Panetta and Savanna Ganucheau. This is actually something that was featured in my book haul for June, which I will link down below. So when I do my book haul revisit for June next year, I have a bit of a win in hand because this will be one book in that haul that I have already read. I read this in a single afternoon. It's a graphic novel, so that's not really a huge triumph. It looks really big. I think it's about 375 pages, somewhere around there. And because it's a graphic novel, there are a lot of pages that don't have dialogue. It goes very quickly. It is exactly what I needed. After finishing Edinburgh, completely recharged my battery, and I got it done completely. Doris from Aldi Books introduced me to the term cinnamon bun. So if there's a really cute couple, you can call them like pure cinnamon buns, basically. And this is 100% cinnamon bun action and joy. It's about Ari, who's this kid over here. He works in his family's struggling bakery and wants to get out. He used to love working in the bakery, but now he feels like he needs to find out who he is and what he wants to do with his life. So he really wants to get out. And in order to do that, he agrees that he will find and hire and train his replacement. So enter Hector, this guy over here, who loves to bake, is actually in culinary school, but is in town for the summer while he helps settle some affairs for a family member who died. And he starts working at the family bakery. Ari is training him. Obviously, sparks fly and romance blooms, if you want a pun. It's a really cute book. I do think it doesn't delve into its themes really deeply at all. It pretty much glances superficially over them, but I didn't really need anything deep or in-depth, so it was a really light, easy, happy read, and I enjoyed it for that. I also found out that there was a sequel coming, I think, next year, and I would be interested in doing that as well. So I finished Bloom by Kevin Panetta and Savanna Ganucheau, and it did everything I needed it to do. After that, I picked up This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Mohtar and Max Gladstone. This was something that had been recommended by the people at the Montana Book Company, which is actually where I purchased Bloom this month, by the way. And this is difficult to describe. So you have two agents in a time war. They each travel back and forth in time through different strands of time in order to fight battles using the different strands of time. So the ways in which they do that are very creative and interesting. In one instance, one of the agents is trying to make sure that the wind goes through a cave in a very specific way that will create a sort of howling noise that will inspire someone in the cave to start a temple, which a generation later will inspire someone to do something great. So there's kind of a long game with history. They're not Terminators necessarily going back to kill people to prevent them from having babies or anything like that. That is part of it, but it's much more creative and in-depth. In another one, an agent goes back in time and spends about 10 years embedded with some people doing things, gaining their trust so she can complete her mission. The two different agents, Red and Blue, start taunting each other through letters. And then through taunting, they start getting to know each other. And it's not a spoiler. I thought it was a spoiler when I first did this book in a book haul, but it's not, because it mentions that it's a sapphic love story right on the book. So they're both females and they fall in love. What's really remarkable about their love story is that the fact that they are both females is not remarked on. It's not important to the plot at all. It is just treated like a romance. And the LGBTQ angle of this book is very matter of fact, which is really nice and refreshing. This is a bizarre book. In the beginning, it felt like basically the format is the same. You join one of the agents, Red or Blue, on a mission, and then at the end they find a letter. And the ways in which they pass letters back and forth to each other are incredible and very creative. In one of them, an owl pellet contains a message. In another one, the rings of a tree contain the message. Each ring has a part of the message, like a different line going out and out and out across the years. It's very creatively handled. I did think in the beginning that the letters were what was really driving the narrative, and the sections about their missions were just the authors trying to be creative and do different things. And that does kind of change in the latter part of the book. The actual action starts to be more important, but it does feel like there's only half of the book that's doing anything for a while. And it's a very small book, so that's not that big of a complaint. It's barely 200 pages, which is probably how I was able to finish it so quickly. I actually finished this in one day, which is wildly unusual for me. I started it Sunday afternoon, and by Monday I was done. And that was kind of astonishing. And I enjoyed it. I didn't love it, but I did enjoy it, and I'm grateful for the recommendation from Montana Book Company, and it was a fun twist on an LGBTQ book. It's a very different sort of Pride read, and I really enjoyed it for that. And I'm glad I read it, and I look forward to talking about it more. Science fiction is very different for me, so I'm trying to find ways I can engage with it as a genre, and this was a successful venture into that. Now, last week I mentioned that I had finished my audiobook that I had been listening to, and I was about to start A Single Man by Christopher Isherwood on audio. I did that, and the next book that I finished was that. And I really enjoyed this book. I had seen the movie and I enjoyed it. I don't remember the movie all that well, so I feel like I should rewatch it at some point. This is about a man named George who is reeling from the death of his lover a year earlier, and it's basically a day in his life. Throughout his day, you have little vignettes where he spends a little bit of time with characters and has some philosophical ponderings a bit, but it's a very beautifully written book, and the way in which he maneuvers through these spaces is very consistent. His attitude is very consistent. You really get a handle on who he is and what he is going through, and I think that's beautiful. And you also see how he's struggling with grief, even though he feels like he is not allowed to grieve his lover because of who he is and the time he lives, and because his lover was a man, and people don't really understand that. I really enjoyed this book a lot. It's definitely not a happy LGBTQ book. In the grand tradition of mid-1900s gay novels, it is just not particularly happy, but it's also not particularly sad. The ending is a little ambiguous, but I really enjoyed it. I'm glad I read it. I had been wanting to read another book by Christopher Isherwood for a long time. The only other one that I had read was Berlin Stories, which was the inspiration for Cabaret. And I'm glad I got another one in. I would like to explore his work a little further. This was a good one. This edition of the book that I have is a Picador book that is sort of pocket-sized, so you could carry it with you. It's kind of fun. But I ended up listening to it on audio. The narrator of the audiobook is also spectacular. So now we get to the two books that I am reading right now, and I'm enjoying these as well. The first one is Camp by L.C. Rosen, again, because I kind of wanted to do something light after Edinburgh. Even though I managed to get two other books in the meantime, I still wanted something a little bit fun. So what better than a YA rom-com set in a summer camp for gay teenagers? It's perfect. And I'm actually really enjoying it. I know a lot of people can get a bit of attitude about YA, but this is really smart YA. Sorry, my calendar just beeped. So I need to try to finish this up and get back to work. Basically, the writing is YA. YA writing is different from fiction or literary fiction. I hate the term literary fiction, but it's different from that. And this is YA writing. If you don't like that, don't pick up this book. But it's really fun, and it's really smart, and it's sex positive, it's gender affirming, sexuality affirming, it's everything I ever would have wanted in a YA book when I was a teenager and didn't have. So the premise is that you have a boy named Randall who has been going to this summer camp for LGBTQ people for, I think this is his 5th summer that he's going there. 4th summer. He first went there when he was 12, he is now 16. Every summer, he has been infatuated with this boy named Hudson, who is very masculine and sort of embodies the masculine ideal. But Hudson has never been interested in Randall, never really noticed him at all. And that is really because Randall is very effeminate. He hangs out with very effeminate, flamboyant people, and he is part of the drama club, and Hudson doesn't really go in for that. So this summer, he has worked out, built up a little bit of muscles. He has completely changed his wardrobe. He is not wearing any nail polish or anything like that. He is managing the way he walks. He is managing the way he talks, trying to talk much more deeply and masculine, and not doing any of the things he would usually do. Like, he is not taking part in the theater production of Bye Bye Birdie that they are going to be putting on. He cut his hair short so Hudson would notice him. And sure enough, Hudson does notice him, and they begin a sort of relationship. Basically, his plan is that once Hudson really gets to know him, he will love him, and it won't matter if he wears nail polish and does theater or any of those things. So it's a sort of standard romantic comedy premise. It's been done before, but this LGBTQ angle is actually really fun and smart, and it's fun that it even pokes fun at the premise in a very smart way. Like, his friends will say to him at frequent points, how is Hudson really going to get to know you if you're pretending to be somebody that you're not? And there's a lot of other really smart work that Elsie Rosen does, because instead of doing theater camp, Randall signs on. Oh, by the way, instead of Randall, he's going by Dell, because Randell. Anyway, he signs up for like obstacle courses and other sports type things, and he finds that he can kind of do them because he applies techniques he's learned in theater. It's sort of like a performance, and he can do like obstacle courses because it's about balance and dexterity and movement, which is basically dance. And it's funny because I mentioned I don't typically do sci-fi, so I look for ways in which sci-fi will be accessible to what I like, and this kind of fit it. And that's kind of what Randall is doing, and hopefully in the end what Hudson will be doing. I assume there's going to be a happy ending to this, but it also really pokes into the argument of masculinity versus femininity for cisgender men. And that is really interesting. One of the woman who runs the camp does a lecture on Stonewall and what people were fighting for, and how in the early days, gay people tried to present respectable images, thinking that if they were respectable, people would be forced to accept them. And there was, in particular, an image of a woman who had dressed in a masculine style because she was a lesbian, and she put on a dress and high heels, and the people from her, I want to say it was the Daughters of Bilitis, applauded. And they have this really interesting conversation about whether or not it should have mattered. And this is an issue that the LGBTQ community still faces. There's a debate this year about whether or not Pride should be more quote-unquote respectable. And this book is having that philosophical debate within the context of a YA rom-com. And I kind of love it for that. I should mention that this was recommended by Jen the Librarian. I will link her channel down below. If you don't follow it, you should. It's fantastic. She talks about a lot of LGBTQ books, but a lot of other books as well. And she had mentioned this book, and I immediately ordered it based on her recommendation. It's interesting, and I've kind of torn through it. I am halfway through. It's about 400 pages, and I'm 200 pages in. And what's interesting as well is that the first 100 pages of this book, so fully a quarter of the book, is the first day of camp. And then the next 50 or 60 pages is the second day of camp. So almost half of the book is the first 2 days of camp. But what that does is it really introduces the characters and the conflict, lets you get to know them and the different sides of everything that's going on, and it sets a routine for what the camp days are like. So when they start skimming through what the days are like, you have a much deeper sense of everything that's going on and what those days look like. And it's actually a really smart move. And I'm really enjoying this and looking forward to finishing it. I should be done with it very soon, certainly by the end of the weekend. And I would definitely recommend Camp by Elsie Rosen to you. I know a lot of people get attitude about YA books, but this is a good one. The audio that I'm listening to is actually something that my husband and I have kind of listened to at the same time. He's already done because he had a road trip this week, and I am still working my way through. I have a copy of the book, Forced Out, A Detective Story of Prejudice and Resilience by Kevin Maxwell. Kevin Maxwell grew up wanting to be a police officer in the UK, became a police officer, and there he faced double discrimination. First, for being a black man on a predominantly white police force. Second, for being a gay man. And he even talks in one point about the hierarchy of people. You have the white male heterosexual police officers, the female heterosexual police officers, the white male gay police officers, the white lesbian officers, black straight officers, and so on down. Like, black gay man doesn't even compute. There are a lot of difficult situations that he faces, and I'm only maybe a third of the way into this, and it's kind of staggering what he has to put up with. But I believe every word of it. For instance, he has to deal with a lot of the officers in one of the locations where he is stationed saying homophobic things and racist things. And at first he feels like he can't complain, but then he comes out and he says something about them making homophobic statements. No one at any point investigates or tells the other officers stop being homophobic or stop saying homophobic things. They move him to a different location. They have him report to a different person, a police officer who is a lesbian, even though she has nothing to do with his station, just because they tell him, you'll be more comfortable this way. They're not trying to fix anything. They're just moving him around and maybe trying to quiet him a little bit. Ultimately, obviously, he ends up leaving. I know that that is something that is coming. It's the premise of the book. I am really interested and engaged in this book, and it's difficult. It's a little bit maddening. It's a lot maddening, actually. But I'm looking forward to finishing this book, and finishing both of these by the end of June for Pride reading is extremely doable. Like I said, I definitely think I'll be done with camp by the end of the weekend, and I should be able to finish this by the end of the month. I'm getting through this more slowly because work has been insane this week. In terms of Pride reading for the rest of the month, if I finish camp by Sunday, that really only leaves me 2 more days in the month. So the likelihood that I will finish any of the other priority books that I put on my pile of possibilities for Pride Month, say that 3 times fast, is slim. Odds are anything else I pick up from this pile is going to carry over into July. I am kind of thinking that Women of Brewster Place by Gloria Naylor is a likely contender for what I would pick up next, because there's a chance I could power through it in time to have it done by the end of July. Of the ones that are left, it's probably the most likely candidate to be finished within the month, but I don't know. I think The Story of the Night by Colm Tobin is unlikely at this point because it's a heavy subject matter and it's a thick book. So that one is probably not going to happen. The ones I'm gravitating toward the most are The Women of Brewster Place, A Boy's Own Story, This Brutal House, and Cantora's. And like I said, I think Women of Brewster Place is something I'm leaning toward just because I feel like I could get it in before the end of the month. If I were going to pick from the others, I want to say A Boy's Own Story, but Cantora's is actually, I feel like it's calling my name. In July, I really want to read Gone with the Wind, but I may carry a little bit of Pride reading into the first week of July and see how that goes. Try to get a little extra in at the end. So that is everything I have read this week. Lots more to talk about than usual, which is wild. I'd love to hear what you have been reading, what you've loved. If you have thoughts on any of these, please put it in the comment section down below. We'll see if I get anything else in before the end of the month. Happy Pride, happy reading. As always, I really appreciate your time, especially if you've made it to this point of this video, especially if you follow along. As always, I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.